we are back again with On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMAPlay365. I'm your host Newsome, and we're here to talk about UFC Vegas 7 at, you've guessed it, the Apex in Vegas. But just before we get into that, we're coming off another mixed event at MMAPlay365. The official bets went 1-1 with DC coming up short against Miocic, but with Jairzinho Rozenstruik knocking out Junior Dos Santos. The fun gamblers were having fun once again though, with an 11-1 plus 1100 parlay cash in. A $10 bet on that would have paid for nearly 4 months of betting advice at MMAPlay365 too. Remember, we have multiple packages on the MMAPlay365 website with UFC betting advice and daily fantasy sports content for DraftKings and FanDuel too. We also have various subscription lengths and options too. So to see our full service list, please go and visit MMAPlay365.com for more information or to sign up today. And let's go, let's break down some fights. And in the main event, in the bantamweight division, we've got Pedro Munhoz versus Frankie Edgar making his bantamweight debut. Pedro Munhoz minus 250 favourite on the betting line. The comeback on Edgar at plus 210 as the underdog. Now, as for the value on the betting line, I think the value is currently with Pedro Munhoz marginally. At minus 250, I don't think it's something you should really be playing straight. And it's always tricky with Frankie Edgar because of his wrestling prowess. You know, yes, he's 38. Yes, he's dropping down a division this late on in his career. There's question marks regarding his durability. All these things we'll get into shortly. But with that said, I do think he holds some value, maybe being a good parlay piece. As for where the line moves, I don't think it's going to move too much from where we're at right now. We might see some money coming in on Edgar a little bit later on into fight week, just taking that chance because he's a name value, because he's got those skills and abilities in wrestling. But ultimately, I think if it gets closer to minus 200, then the money's going to come back in the other way on Edgar, push it back, like I said, to roughly where we are right about now. So I don't see it closing too far away from where we're sitting now with it. And as for how this fight plays out, I have touched upon it already. Edgar, 38 years old, dropping down to 135 pounds for the first time in his career. He has looked a little bit chinny lately. He can't take the shots that he used to be able to take. And listen, he's been in some wars. He used to have an absolute iron chin. I think it's just catching up with him. I'm not sure that the move down to bantamweight is the best move for him because he is going to be cutting more weight. Because he's cutting more weight, there is a chance that that durability is affected even more, which is definitely a concern against someone like Munhoz, because although Munhoz is not known for his knockout power, he can definitely finish fights in the bantamweight division with his hands, with his kicks. So for me, I think it's actually a really risky fight for Edgar. He's got to get his wrestling going. But then this is the other thing. If he starts wrestling, I do think his cardio will be a little bit better if he chooses a wrestling heavy game plan, just because he's wrestled all his life. But with that said, I'm not sure that he can do it for 25 minutes. And again, that's a big concern. I think Pedro Munhoz has at least got 4 solid rounds in him. 5th round, he might tire. We'll see. This is going to be a new commodity for him as well, being a 5-round, 25-minute fight. So it's definitely risky for Edgar, but I think Munhoz is rightly favoured in this fight. I think it's going to be tough for Edgar to out-wrestle Munhoz for those 5 rounds, which is what you'd need to do. Essentially, if it goes 5 rounds, Edgar would only need to out-wrestle him for 3. But the other spin on this is, if Edgar's wrestling him, he's giving Munhoz opportunities to lock in that nasty guillotine that Munhoz has. And it's a serious guillotine, one where he'll tie you up to the point where he won't even give you any arms free to tap. You know, you'll either tap with your legs or you'll verbally tap. Maybe you might be able to do a little tap on the side of the body that the referee can see, but it's a nasty, nasty guillotine with how he locks it in. So the more Edgar shoots on Munhoz, the more tired Edgar's going to get. The more tired he gets, the more laboured the takedowns are going to be. I just think that progressively as we go through this fight, it's just going to get tougher and tougher for Edgar the longer the fight goes on. And the thing is, I don't see Edgar finishing Munhoz, which I think he needs to do early in this fight if he's going to win. If he doesn't knock Munhoz out in round 1 or round 2, I think it's going to be a relatively long night for Edgar. I think Frankie Edgar is massively outmatched on the feet in regards to power, volume, the mix, the combinations of kicks and punches. I just think Munhoz puts it together really, really well. I think he's a serious contender in the division. And although Frankie Edgar is definitely the better wrestler, and if this fight was 5 or 6 years ago, then I think we'd be seeing Frankie Edgar as a favourite. but rightfully so, he's not a favourite in this fight. I think it's a tough one for him. If he does win, I don't think it's one of those fights where you'll be overly shocked, because we all know the skills and the qualities that Edgar possesses. I just feel that once Munhoz feels his way into this fight, starts landing his hands, starts landing kicks to the body, starts mixing it all up, he will have to defend some takedowns, but he can threaten with that guillotine. I just think Munhoz has got more tools, more weapons in that arsenal, and he's more dangerous from a finishing perspective as well. So I'm finding it really tough to pick Frankie Edgar to win this fight, and for that reason, I'm picking Pedro Munhoz to win the fight. And in the co-main event, we've got an interesting one. We've got Ovince St. Preux back down at 205 pounds at light heavyweight, taking on the young, powerful Alonzo Menified. And it's Alonzo Menified, the -125 favourite. The comeback on Ovince St. Preux at +105 as the underdog. Now, as for the value on this betting line, by the way, has been going nuts over the last 48 hours. And there's been money coming in on both sides constantly. So it's going to be really interesting to see where the betting line ends in this fight, where it closes. But as for the value, I do think the value sits with Menified right now for reasons that I will touch upon a little bit later. But I think that Menified has still got quite a lot to give. I think he's still developing, and it's the power that I just don't think OSP can handle. You know, if Alonzo Menified lands a few hard punches on him, I'm just not totally convinced that OSP can stay conscious. But OSP's definitely got paths to victory as well. That's why the lines are quite close. I just think that the value is with Menified, with the lines where they're at right about now. And like I say, I'm not too sure where the line's going to move. It wouldn't shock me to see money coming in on OSP at plus money and then at pick and money and push Alonzo Menified out to plus money himself. It really wouldn't shock me that much at all. I actually think it's going to close roughly around a pick'em. I think it is going to meet in the middle. I think there's going to be strong opinions on either side of this fight, and for that reason, I think there's going to be money constantly coming in on either side. I think it'll close quite close come Saturday night. But as for how this fight plays out, like I said, it's really interesting because OSP we thought was on his way out a couple of years ago, and although he's coming off a loss against Ben Rothwell, it was upper weight class in the heavyweight division against a really big heavyweight. And to be honest with you, OSP put a good account of himself out there. He dropped Rothwell at points in that fight. He didn't look really bad in that fight. He didn't gas. He looked like he actually fit quite well in the heavyweight division, to be honest. In the fight before that, he took out Michal Oleksiejczuk, who was a fighter, again, that people were calling a prospect. A fighter that people are excited to see. He overcome a lot of adversity in that fight. So in OSP's last two fights, he's looked decent. And then on the flip side, Alonzo Menified, he was a fighter that, again, everyone's excited about. People were talking about him being at the top of the division, the future of the light heavyweight division. And then in his last fight, unfortunately, it was first L time for Menified. Unless you're called Khabib Nurmagomedov and potentially now Khamzat Chimaev, you are going to take that loss in the UFC at some point. And to be honest, before I actually taped this fight, I thought, or I remembered, that the Menified loss to Clark was really bad. He looked terrible. There was a lot of question marks, a lot of red flags and things like that. But actually, after I rewatched it and really broke the fight down, I'm seeing this a little differently to what I think a lot of other people are. I don't really see it as a terrible performance from Menified. I see it as a lesson learned. I see a fighter that did tire after round one, a fighter that slowed down. He didn't completely gas to the point where his hands was on his hips or his knees and he couldn't move and he couldn't do anything. He actually pushed through that tiredness, really put the pressure on Clark. Yes, Clark was landing more volume at this point. He was fresher. He was the fighter that's got more experience in the UFC, and that really showed on the night. But the fact that Menified never gave up and pushed on till the final bell, I think really speaks volumes, and I expect him to be in better shape in this fight. It was a real learning curve for him against Devin Clark. The other thing that I was quite surprised about when I actually broke this fight down as well is the takedown defense of Menified. I was surprised because it's not often you see that young prospect who has that knockout power being that good defensively when it comes to wrestling. And it took Devin Clark 8 attempts to get him down before he actually got down. And then when he took Menified down, he spent a little bit of time on top. Clark put him in some bad positions. Positions, by the way, I think OSP would actually finish Alonzo Menified, which is definitely a concern. But after Clark spent a bit of time on Menified found his way back up to his feet in the third round again whilst he's tired and whilst his energy appears to be zapped. So I think there's a lot of positives to take out of that fight. I think he's going to learn a lot from the defeat. And as an all-round fighter, he's got wicked power. I don't think many fighters will be able to take clean punches from Menified. You saw the one punch that he landed on Clark that completely messed his eye up for the entire fight. The power that Alonzo Menified packs is probably some of the biggest power in the light heavyweight division, period. So OSP has got to be careful in this fight. He can't get clipped by Menified because I just don't think he's going to be able to eat those punches. However, on the flip side, OSP does have advantages in this fight. If he can take Menified down to the mat, I don't think it's going to be easy. I think Clark is a better wrestler than what OSP is inside the cage. So OSP has got to really work hard for the takedowns, but ultimately that's what he needs. If he can get Menified down and spend 90 seconds, 2 minutes on top of Menified, then I think we're going to see a scenario where OSP submits him. I genuinely think that once OSP is on top, he will be better than what Clark was on top, and that's the difference. I think Clark's wrestling was better, but I think OSP's grappling's better. So Menifield's definitely got his work cut out for him in this fight. He can't get sloppy. He's got to pace himself a little bit. He can't be throwing everything in every punch. But when you're looking at the paths to victory here, you've got Menified who can definitely knock OSP out on the feet. You've got OSP that could definitely submit Menified. But I'm picking Alonzo Menified to win this fight because all fights start standing. So Menified has got that path to victory from the get-go. And OSP has got to work to take Menified down. It's not going to come easy. If he gets him down, then that becomes an easier job to submit him. But it's getting Menified down that I think it's going to be tough for OSP, and if he doesn't get him down within the first round or two, I feel that OSP's energy is going to zap as well. I mean, we've spoke about the cardio of Menified not looking great against Clark, but OSP at 205, his gas tank isn't great either. So if this is a case of 1-1 going into the third, I don't think Menified will knock OSP out in the third because he'll be tired. I don't expect OSP to take Menified down because he'll be tired. So it's likely going to go to a decision, and I just think Menified will be the one pushing forward, pushing against OSP, grinding him on the cage. I think that Menified is the more dangerous fighter and the fighter with maybe the extra path to victory. So I'm going to pick Alonzo Menified to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Mike Rodriguez versus Marcin Prachnio. Mike Rodriguez currently the minus 235 favourite. The comeback on Prachnio at plus 195 as the underdog. As for where the value is in this betting line, I actually think that the value is with the underdog in Marcin Prachnio. Now, it's going to be one of those fights where either fighter could get a knockout for sure. They're both aggressive. They both come forward. They both like to swing. But I'm just not sure that Mike Rodriguez should be a minus 235 favourite at all. I think the line's really, really wide, considering that he was knocked out cold by Daun Jung, and then the fight before that, he was beaten unanimously by John Allen on his UFC debut. Now, John Allen was popped by USADA after that fight. It was overturned, became a no contest, but the point still stands. Mike Rodriguez hasn't looked that good for a while, so to be a minus 235 favourite I think is a little crazy. As for where the line moves during fight week, I actually think that we do see some Prachnio money coming in. I'm not sure how much will come in, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Rodriguez coming in at under minus 200 the closer we get to Saturday night. Now, as for how this fight plays out, again, I've already touched upon it. I think it's going to be a wild fight. Both fighters are predominantly strikers. I would be a little bit surprised to see a takedown in this fight, but if any fighter is shooting takedowns, I think it might be Mike Rodriguez. He does seem to be the slightly better offensive wrestler and the one that's more likely going to shoot. And Prachnio, I think, has got problems definitely off his back. So if Rodriguez is actually smart in this fight, he probably would take Prachnio down, and that's an easier path to victory for him. But both fighters like to stand and bang. I think if Rodriguez starts landing early on Prachnio, Prachnio is not that defensively aware when it comes to his striking. Take the Sam Alvey fight, for example. But I think if Rodriguez starts getting off on some strikes early in this fight, I think he won't even consider the offensive wrestling and looking to shoot in on Prachnio. I think it'll be if Prachnio starts getting off on strikes, starts clipping Rodriguez, maybe hurts him, that's where we might see Rodriguez shooting. But ultimately, this fight could just end in an absolute flash. I think that Prachnio has got some question marks on him for sure, some red flags. You look at the Sam Alvey fight, Prachnio was getting touched up by Alvey, which there's no shame in that. Sam Alvey's a great fighter, but it's when Prachnio just charged forward at him with his hands down and his chin wide open, asking to be cracked. He got cracked and he got laid out. In the fight after that, Magomed Ankalaev, at the time we thought, okay, well maybe Prachnio isn't what we thought he was going to be coming into the UFC, but now knowing what we know about Ankalaev, bear in mind I've had these thoughts about Ankalaev since day one that I taped him, we know that Ankalaev is a future prospect in this division, a potential champion. So there's no shame in losing to Ankalaev either. It's this fight where we really see where Prachnio's at. Because Mike Rodriguez, I think, is a beatable fighter for him, a beatable opponent. He's definitely not in the same class as Ankalaev, and I don't think he's in the same class as what Sam Alvey is either. So this is a beatable opponent for either fighter. It's going to be a fun fight. I'm actually picking the underdog in this fight. I think that after seeing what Daun Jung did to Rodriguez, if Prachnio can crack Rodriguez, I think he can knock him out. And although Rodriguez could knock Prachnio out as well, I think the better technical striker is Prachnio. So although both fighters have that knockout opportunity, I am going to side with the fighter that I believe is the better technical striker inside the cage. I'm picking Marcin Prachnio to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Mariya Agapova versus Shana Dobson. Agapova currently the -1,000 favourite, the biggest favourite on the night. The comeback on Dobson at +650. Of course, the biggest underdog of the night. And although the betting line is seriously wide, I understand why it's wide, but the fact that Mariya Agapova in a second fight in the UFC is a -1,000 favourite is just mind-blowing to me. I expected a wide line. I was thinking maybe -400, -500, -1,000. I get it. She's the fighter that's young. She's the fighter that's hungry. We've got Dobson on the other hand that hasn't looked great in her last few fights. So I do understand why Agapova is heavily favoured, but I can't justify -1,000. I don't think that there's any value in the betting line because even though it's hard to justify that -1,000 line for Agapova, I don't think betting Dobson at +650 is a smart bet at all either on the other side. I think it's a clear pass. I think it's a fight where we probably know the outcome. Let's sit back and enjoy it. As for where the line moves come fight night, it wouldn't surprise me if Agapova dropped under the -1,000 line, just purely because I think it's too wide at this level for a second fight in the UFC. I think there's going to be more people taking a small shot on Dobson than what they are adding Agapova to parlays at -1,000. And as for how this fight plays out, I do really see Agapova running through Dobson. I don't like to break fights down in this way, you know. I always feel a little bit disrespectful talking about another fighter in that manner in regards to them getting ran through, but it's a real mismatch. Agapova's on a serious high right now. She's a fighter that's on her way up. Dobson is completely the opposite. She's a fighter that's on her way down. She's a fighter that is on a 3-fight losing streak, including a brutal flash KO from Priscilla Cachoeira, who isn't a fighter that's known for the power, knocked her out cold in round 1. Dobson's now 3-4 as a professional MMA fighter. It's not a good record. I just struggle to see where she's going to beat Agapova because Agapova's the better striker. I think Agapova's better in the clinch. I think if it goes to the mat, Agapova's the better grappler, whether it's offensively or defensively. I think Agapova's got more chance of taking Dobson down than vice versa. I just think it's a real difficult fight for Shana Dobson here. I think that Agapova's going to get off on some strikes very early. I think she's going to come out aggressive. I don't think Dobson's going to be able to deal with it very well. I think Agapova's going to get her out of there. It's just a question of how early can she do it? Does she pace herself? Does she ease her way into the fight, pick her apart first, or does she steamroller? Like I say, I feel really bad for breaking a fight down this way, but I just don't see a path to victory for Dobson apart from that Hail Mary, one shot, knockout, 4-ounce gloves. It can happen. It's just the percentage outcome of that happening is very, very low. I'm picking Mariya Agapova to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a real interesting one. Both guys have actually been busy during the quarantine period with UFC events. We've got Takashi Sato versus Daniel Rodriguez. Daniel Rodriguez currently the -160 favourite. The comeback on Takashi Sato at +140 is the underdog. Now, when I saw this betting line, I was actually really surprised because I was expecting Takashi Sato to be a favourite. So not only am I surprised to see Rodriguez favoured, I'm surprised to see him up at -160. If I'd not seen the betting lines and you told me he was a favourite, I would have assumed maybe -120, -125. So for that reason, I do think that the value with the current betting line, is on the underdog with Takashi Sato. And also for that reason, I do anticipate money coming in on Sato the closer we get to Saturday night. I just don't think he should be this big of an underdog. I do think it'll close up. And I'm not sure if we actually get to a pick'em due to the fact that people are clearly favouring Daniel Rodriguez to win the fight. But we might see that plus 140 turn into plus 120 come Saturday night. And as for how this fight plays out, I think it's a clear power striker versus technical striker. Daniel Rodriguez does pack power. He knocked out Tim Means. Yes, he went to a decision against Gabe Green in his last fight, but that was an exciting fight. He's also durable as well, so even though he's got that power to knock you out, he can also take a punch as well. But with Sato, it's not so much the power, even though he does have a steaming straight left hand down the barrel. It's more from a technical perspective. He's got nice movement. He sits in that sidewards karate stance a little bit as well. He'll move forward. He'll make reads. He'll land a jab. He'll land 1-2s. It tends to be straight punches. He's got kicks in there as well. He trains with Henry Hoof at Hard Knocks 365 with guys like Usman, the Burns brothers, Luque. So this guy is developing, and you can see that as well. He is looking better and better each time that we see him. Now, the one knock on this fight from Sato's perspective stylistically is the fact that this is actually a southpaw versus southpaw fight. So that straight left down the barrel is likely not going to be as devastating against another southpaw than what it is fighting a more conventional style fighter. But on the flip side, Daniel Rodriguez likes to use a nice jab. He's got a good jab. But again, there's going to be a battle for that lead hand with it being a clash of stances. So that jab isn't going to be prominent either. I think what we're going to see here is two fighters that are predominantly strikers that are going to have some of their best weapons taken away from them with this stylistic matchup. So with that being said, I think we're going to see Rodriguez look more for the big power punches coming from that big left hand. I think we're going to see him maybe overreaching, overextending at times, looking for that one big shot. And we're going to see Sato maybe use a few more kicks, really rely on his technique to find that straight left, because it's not going to be as open in, again, this clash of stances. So this is where I favour the more technical striker, because fighter that's going to make the better initial reads, the fighter that's going to adjust better inside the cage, that's going to give himself more time, be more patient, is the fighter that's ultimately going to get the hand raised on the night. And I think that fighter's Sato. I think Rodriguez, the longer the fight goes on, the more he'll start winging that big power punch if he can't get his jab going. And the more Sato makes reads, the more adjustments Sato makes inside the cage, I think we'll see Rodriguez become a little more frustrated as the fight goes on, which again should play into the hands of Sato. Sato could absolutely get knocked out by one of Rodriguez's big hands, big bombs, lands on the chin, knocks him out. But I just don't think that Rodriguez will win this fight if that doesn't happen, because I think Sato is the more intelligent fighter and the fighter that's going to make those correct adjustments and react to the situation inside the cage with the stylistic matchup. So for that reason, I'm picking Takashi Sato to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Mizuki Inoue versus Amanda Lemos. Inoue currently the minus 160 favourite. The comeback on Lemos at plus 140 is the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, I do think that there's minimal value on Inoue at minus 160. Just 24 hours ago, we were seeing her at minus 190. At that point, there's no value in her whatsoever. But at minus 160, there's some value there. I do think she's rightfully favoured. I do think that Lemos is a decent fighter, but one of her previous fights is very misleading, which I'll talk about soon. As for where the line goes, as for where it moves closer to fight night on Saturday night, I do think we are going to see that Lemos money coming in. I think we might see Mizuki Inoue minus 150, minus 145, and I think it'll settle at that range. As for how this fight plays out, like I say, Lemos is a decent fighter. She looks like she's got good aggressive striking. She looks like she's got nice low kicks as well. But the fight against Leslie Smith is really misleading, because although she was doing really well against Leslie Smith, which isn't an easy task, Smith was a very difficult fighter to fight against inside the UFC. But Lemos was looking good. She was getting off on strikes. She was landing some power shots as well. She cut Leslie Smith open. She didn't mind the brawl. But that's the thing with Leslie Smith. Smith was a brawler. Because she was a brawler, she was very hittable. Lemos was then able to get off on these shots because all Smith does was hands down, walk forward, make the fight ugly, get aggressive, and bang. Lemos was able to get off on shots because of that. However, that type of fighter isn't Mizuki in a way. She won't be a fighter that's coming in with her hands down, looking to brawl. She's a fighter that is very quick, good center of gravity, will get in and out of range, moving really quickly, landing strikes inside of range. If she can get a hold of you, she'll try and take you down. That's where her bread and butter is, on the mat. She's got really slick grappling off her back or on top, so you've got to be careful even if you take her down. That, again, is not going to be a fighter that is going to allow you to hit her like Leslie Smith did. So that's where I feel that Lemos is a little misleading, and we're unsure of how good she actually is, because in that Leslie Smith fight, she was allowed to look good. Against Inoue, it's a completely different style of fight. And I don't think that she's going to be able to look good against Inoue. I think Inoue is improving in her striking as well. And if she's not there to be hit and she's landing as she's moving in and out of range on Lemos, I think that's going to look good for the judges. I think it's going to rack up volume. I think it's going to cause frustration on Lemos. Lemos might even pursue a takedown herself in that scenario. That's going to give Inoue a chance to either submit Lemos off her back or try and sweep her or try and reverse position in a scramble. I just feel that Inoue's got more paths to victory in this fight. I don't think she's the better striker, but she's definitely the better mover, and I think she's faster as well, which might even make her look like the better striker. But I think Inoue's got more paths to victory. I think she's the more dangerous fighter from a finishing perspective as well. So I'm going to be picking Mizuki Inoue to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a fight that should have happened a few weeks ago. We've got Austin Hubbard versus Joe Solecki. Joe Solecki currently the -145 favourite. The comeback on Hubbard at +125. As for where the value is on this betting line, I do think it sits with Joe Solecki. And it's also very interesting that Joe Solecki was around a -180 favourite last time these two guys were scheduled to fight. Obviously, the Hubbard and Max Ruskop fight is really playing a factor into the betting line. Like I say, I think the value's with Joe Solecki at -145. As for where the line moves, I think that we're going to see more Solecki money coming in. I think we will see him up at -160, maybe -170. But because of that Ruskop fight, I do think at that point we will see people taking that shot on Hubbard, which will bring the line down. I think it'll settle not too far off where we're at right about now. Maybe -150, -155 for Solecki come Saturday night when they enter the cage. But as for how this fight plays out, as I've already mentioned, I think a lot of stock is going into that Ruskop fight. I don't put too much stock into that. It's very evident that Ruskop wasn't ready for the UFC. He didn't have a good fight. He started off decent, he wasn't electric. I picked Ruskop to win. I thought he had some legitimate skills, but ultimately he was just letting Hubbard get the better of him. And then he quit on the stool in between round 2 to round 3, which I've said a million times on Twitter. I agree with that decision. If you, as a fighter, do not want to get back inside that cage the next round or the next minute or whenever it is, then you should not be in that cage, because that's not the place to mentally break, because that's what Ruskop did. And there's another reason I don't put too much stock into that fight when I'm looking at this fight, and that's because Joe Solecki is not Ruskop. Ruskop for sure has better wrestling credentials than Solecki. That's no secret. But on the mat, with the grappling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the comparison, it's just not even close. Joe Solecki has got real good positional awareness, and actually Ruskop took Hubbard down twice. It's just with Ruskop being quite green, he was rushing positions. That made him positionally really poor. He allowed Hubbard to escape positions that he probably shouldn't have been escaping and getting back up to his feet. If Solecki gets Hubbard in those same positions, I don't think Hubbard is allowed to get back up to his feet. One thing that Solecki does really well, his awareness whilst he's on top of his fighters. He'll watch for which way they're moving, for which way they're trying to escape and trying to get out of bad positions. And what he does is he counters those potential transitions and those potential escapes to keep you on the mat. He's all about position first, then he'll look for submissions if it becomes available, but he'll stay busy with punches as well. On the mat, Solecki is just night and day a better grappler than what Ruskop is. On the feet, it's really close, because although Solecki's not out of his depth, I do think that Hubbard is the better striker, is the grittier striker. He'll be the one that can walk through punches, that can make the fight really ugly and really dirty. And that's a problem for Solecki, because Solecki's got to not fall into that trap. So many fighters fall into that ugly, grindy style of trap that these types of fighters put on them. Solecki's got to not do that. He's got to stick to his own game plan. It's not going to be easy for Solecki to take Hubbard down, I will say that as well, because although Solecki's got decent wrestling, I don't think it's phenomenal wrestling. I think that Hubbard has fought better takedown artists in the UFC than Solecki. That doesn't mean Solecki can't take him down. I actually think that Solecki will take him down a couple of times. I'm not convinced Hubbard will get up at all. And if there's no finish in this fight, if Solecki doesn't finish Hubbard on the mat, or if Hubbard doesn't finish Solecki on the feet, you've got to ask yourself when it goes 3 rounds, who's going to do enough to take 2 out of those 3 rounds at least? I think if it goes to a decision, it could be relatively close, and the judges will be looking for some sort of edge. And I think because Solecki will have some top time in at least 2 out of the 3 rounds, I think the edge on the decision, on the scorecards, will go to Solecki. For me, that gives him the extra paths to victory, so I'm picking Joe Solecki to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jorge Gonzalez versus Ike Villanueva. And as I'm talking right now, this fight is a straight up pick'em at -110 either side. And because this fight is a pick'em, if you've got a good read on either side, both sides are playable. -110 is definitely a playable betting line, like I say, if you've got that good read. As for where the money comes in, it wouldn't shock me to see money coming in on Gonzalez. I know Villanueva has already had his UFC debut. He lost against Chase Sherman. Chase Sherman looked great that night, or at least Villanueva made him look great, whichever one you want to pick. But Jorge Gonzalez, I think, is a fighter that is going to have more volume. He's predominantly a striker. He will mix it up on the mat if he needs to, but he'll stay on the feet. He's quite technical. He'll look to get in and out of range. I think Villanueva is going to be the thicker guy inside the cage. He's probably going to be heavier come fight night as well. But Jorge Gonzalez, I feel, will have more volume. I think he will be technically slightly better. I think he mixes things up slightly better as well. I'm not sold on him totally as a fighter, but in this fight, stylistically, if Villanueva can't knock him out, I do question what Villanueva is going to look like come midway through round 2 or into round 3. And I think we'll see Jorge Gonzalez start winning rounds. So if he doesn't finish Villanueva, I think that he's going to look better on the scorecards. So again, it's the paths to victory. I think that although Villanueva is the more likely fighter to finish in this fight, if he doesn't get that finish, I'm just not convinced he's going to win. So I'm picking Jorge Gonzalez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got 2 newcomers. We've got Matthew Semelsberger versus Carlton minus. Carlton minus, currently the -140 favourite. The comeback on Semelsberger at +120. Where the value is with this betting line, I think it's with the underdog with Semelsberger at +120. I've got absolutely no idea what makes Carlton minus a -140 favourite in this fight. I'm not saying he's a bad fighter, it's just I haven't seen anything from him that makes me instantly think, okay, that dude should be a favourite. And the craziest thing about the betting line is minus opened up at -365, which is nuts to me. A bookie somewhere has created that betting line. Someone's seen something on minus or knows something on minus to make him that big of a favourite. It hasn't shocked me that the money's come in to the fact he was -365, now he's -140. And I think for where the betting line goes, it will keep coming in, and it wouldn't shock me to see this fight as a pick'em. As for how this fight plays out, Semelsberger to me looks like the bigger dude. He looks like the fighter that is going to be taller, rangier. Now the difference is, I think Semelsberger is more wild in regards to his striking. Carlton minus is a little bit more reserved. He likes to stay on the outside, coming in the right opportunities. He looks like he's actually quite a smart fighter, to be honest. He doesn't rush in and go wild, and he doesn't let the moment get the better of him. He's really patient, and he prefers technique over power, what it looks like to me. Now both fighters, I think, have got holes in the wrestling. I think both guys can get taken down. I think when they're on the back, they're not terrific. They can get back up to the feet, but they're very similar in regards to their abilities. The styles are a little different, but their abilities are very similar. They can both land a takedown. They can both get taken down themselves. They've both got holes in that respect. And in the striking, they're both decent strikers in their own right. I think Semelsberger holds the more power. I think Minus has got the better technique. I think because of the betting line, because Semelsberger's got the plus money next to his name, I'm going to side with the underdog in this fight. From a value perspective, I'm picking Matthew Semelsberger to win this fight. And in the last fight on this breakdown, we've got Striegl versus Valiev. Valiev, the current minus 500 favourite, the comeback on Striegl at plus 400. As for where the value is on this fight, strangely enough, I actually think the value's with Striegl. I think plus 400, if you watch tape on this guy, sure there's some big question marks which I'll touch upon, but plus 400 for Striegl to win here, I think is a really, really big number. So the value for me is on the underdog at plus 400. As for where the line moves, I'm not sure it moves too far off from where we're at right about now. Valiev is a solid fighter. He's the one with the name. He's got a good team around him. People really, really love Valiev as a fighter and how he fights inside the cage. So basically what I'm saying is I don't think people are going to be rushing to the betting window to take Striegl. But on the same respect, I don't think at minus 500 after you've watched tape on Striegl that there's going to be people rushing to bet Valiev either. So it's going to be really interesting to see which way this line actually moves come Saturday night. As for how this fight plays out, I cannot look past Valiev winning this fight. So although I think the value is with Striegl at plus 400, I am going to be picking Valiev to win this fight. I think that Valiev has just got more weapons in his arsenal. I think he's more seasoned. He's fought the way better competition. And I mentioned a clear red flag at the start of this breakdown with Striegl. That's the red flag for me, the level of opponent that Striegl's fought. Striegl is able to do pretty much whatever he wants to his opponents. I don't think any of them are UFC caliber. And I think in that respect, Valiev's got the clear edge when it comes to experience and the level of competition that he's fought. Striegl, though, the dude is absolutely shredded. He looks like he's in shape all year round. He's a very, very well-built fighter. You know, the type of fighter that would look perfect on posters. He's also got some good skills as well. He's a good striker. He'll throw kicks up and down the body. He's got power in his hands. He's got good takedowns. Once he gets on top of his opponents, he'll transition very patiently on the mat. He loves to get into a good side control position, and then he transitions to the scarf hold neck crank, and then he likes to start trying to finish the fight from that position. This is where I think the level of competition plays a part, because I don't think something like that is going to wash with Valiev. If he tries that, Valiev will get out, he'll probably reverse position, and Striegl will probably be on his back eating punches, and the fight might be over not too long after that. I just think Valiev's a really, really well-rounded fighter. He's got good striking. He mixes punches with kicks. He can go through adversity and overcome it. He can take bits of rounds off and then come back and win as well. He's got good pressure. He's got good takedowns. He's got good grappling. He's got submission threats. He's got a TKO threat with ground and pound. I think he's just a good fighter everywhere that has fought better guys than Striegl. I think Striegl, if he stays in the UFC after this fight, that he will get wins for sure. And if the UFC build this guy up slow, give him the right fights. I don't think this is the right fight for him personally, but it's a fight that's getting him onto the map, and I totally get it. If the UFC build this fighter in the right way, he could be a good fighter moving forward, and he'll definitely win fights in the UFC. I just don't think this is one of the fights that he'll win. Valiev's the better fighter, more paths to victory, more finishing potential, and more likely to win a decision. So I'm picking Valiev to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it, and once again, guys, I'd appreciate all likes to the video and subscriptions to the MMAPlay365 YouTube channel too. Remember, you can get all the betting advice you'll ever need over at MMAPlay365.com. We cater for long-term gamblers that like to build their own bets and strategies, gamblers that just want to follow exactly what I bet on, and we also cater for you fun gamblers that like the long shot fun parlays, or ACCAs as we call them in the UK, and we also support the DraftKings and FanDuel players with our daily fantasy sports content as well, which comes with our very own private chat room so you can chat to our expert throughout each fight week. We have plenty of different packages and subscription options for you guys to choose from as well, and they're all at very affordable prices. Just hop on to MMAPlay365.com and see what's best for you. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next event.